Why does every recipe I try need 18 ingredients, including a jar of something paste I'll never use again, but will sit in my fridge for 9 months? I just want dinner in the oven, fast. That's why I love Blue Apron's new one-pan assemble and bake meals. They send you fresh ingredients that are already chopped. All you do is put it all together and bake. That's it. No chopping, no weird leftovers, just delicious, easy-to-make meals. Get 20% off your first 2 orders with code APRON20. Terms and conditions apply. Visit blueapron.com/terms for more.
Explore a new spring collection of pieces that take you to the places you dream about. A suitcase filled with heritage-inspired suede jackets, relaxed linen, and dresses for every adventure. Discover more at bananarepublic.com.
Oh, no. This is a logbook entry from the 26th of October, 2002. Call via Get Connected. 15-year-old male. School found out it was gay and informed parents who are fundamental Christians and now verbally abusing him and making him feel suicidal. Many issues in call. Lack of access to support, lack of resources, money, etc. to contact services. School very unsupportive, citing Section 28 as barrier to tackling abuse.
You're listening to The Logbooks, untold stories from Britain's LGBTQ+ history.
I'm Tash Walker.
And I'm Adam Zmith.
Since we finished making the Logbooks podcast in 2022, we've been writing a book published by Faber. It's called The Logbooks, and Adam's turned 40.
You too!
I don't look at those.
The book goes deeper into Switchboard's archive and other archives, and includes more stories from the 70s, 80s, 90s and noughties. 4 decades!
Listening to queer people's essential stories is always central to our work.
So in this season of the podcast, we want to share some of the interviews we conducted as research for our book.
Now you too can listen to all the amazing, powerfully queer storytellers we've listened to in their own words, with their own voices.
Who are we listening to in this episode, Tash?
We are listening to Monty Moncrief, who, again, we interviewed for the Logbooks podcast
Yeah,
before.
I love Monty.
Yeah, Monty's so lovely. And actually that logbook entry you just heard, so beautifully read by Serena, was actually written by Monty. And the first time he was telling me about his most memorable call, I realised that I had read his words all those years ago. So it was quite an amazing moment. And he always gets so emotional thinking about it. You know, it makes so much sense. But it's also important to remember, listeners, that this interview was done during the Tory government, because Monty references that. And Monty is also the CEO of London Friend, which is an amazing LGBTQ+ organisation in London. Yeah.
So that was the government that ended in July 2024 when Labour came to power.
Yeah, that's right.
He's so kind and thoughtful, Monty. I'm looking forward to listening to him.
Yeah, so here he is. How did it feel being interviewed, like take one, for the Logbooks podcast? Just a process of, you know, you and me going back into those memories. Because Switchboard was such a big part of your life at one point, wasn't it? And then also, I'm interested to know, did you listen to the podcast? And if you did, how did it feel hearing back that?
Yeah, it was an intense experience being interviewed, I think, because of some of the themes that came up. And I remember us discussing one particular memory of a call I took that I'd written in the logbook, and quite by coincidence, you'd found that quote. Yeah. Not knowing that it was me, but when I described the quote, you understood what it was. So looking back at that moment was quite intense, because I remembered all of the emotions of that particular call. But I think, looking back at the time at Switchboard more generally, I mean, it was a really happy time in my life. It was a time when I felt I had a lot of professional development from the opportunities I had at Switchboard, not just on the calls, but also doing the sort of back office work as well. And it's also a time where I made some really lasting friendships. So it took me back to those times. I mean, lots of those people are still friends and I still see them. But it was a good reflection on something which I think has been one of the most positive influences on my life, both professionally and personally.
How long were you at Switchboard again, Monty? I can't remember.
I was there about 9 years. So I was there from 1996 to about 2005. The latter couple of years, sort of a little bit more sporadically before I formally resigned. But yeah.
It's a long time, isn't it? It's a really long time. And I just remembered, of course, last time that we spoke was online, wasn't it? So it wasn't even in person. I think because of COVID and all of the ins and outs of that. And I remember that. I can still remember that call now. It starts like a 15-year-old call via Get Connected. It's just, that was a really amazing moment, actually. It was quite full circle almost, wasn't it?
It's interesting. So I guess the theme of that call was that it was somebody who whose parents were being unsupportive, and they'd found out because the school had informed the parents that the child was gay, and the parents were of a particular religious background and therefore were unsupportive. So it was a really difficult situation for somebody under the age of majority and therefore under the care of their parents, feeling like they had no option. And I think the sort of harm that was doing to them is reflective now of the discussions that are happening around the potential schools guidance for trans pupils, where, the government is adamant that they want teachers to tell parents if they find out a child is trans or non-binary. And it just brings me back to that really clear evidence of the harm of that disclosure and the potential damage that can have to somebody's well-being.
Yeah, and the last time that we spoke, it wasn't really that long ago, but what you're talking about now, we were worried that was going to happen.
Yes.
And we're at a place now where that guidance has been published and
as a draft.
As a draft.
But there is a consultation, but there is the possibility that could become guidance for schools to follow. I mean, who knows where we'll go with the election and a different government, but it's a real fear at the moment. It's causing a lot of anxiety for trans and non-binary young people and pupils and students.
Do you remember, I mean, this is just going off on a tangent, but we're sort of in this point now, but when you were at Switchboard and on the phones, do you remember taking calls from trans, well, I suppose then it would have been trans people. I don't think, we didn't have gender, non-conforming or non-binary.
Yeah, quite a lot. We used to get a lot of, I guess we would have called them at the time transvestite calls, people talking about cross-dressing, but also increasingly during my time, there were more calls around gender identity and people talking about transitioning. I thought it was always interesting, the kind of the cross-dressing calls. There was a real pattern to them where people would ring and want to discuss what they were wearing and how it was making them feel. And of course, that wasn't the purpose of Switchboard. But I understood that to be that, this is something which is really important for those people. And they often don't have any other outlet to talk about and express this aspect of who they are. But the far more interesting calls were the calls that were talking about gender identity, where people really strongly felt that they were of another gender and were talking about how to access transition support through the NHS, etc. It was always a topic which really interested me. And I felt, because this was coming up, I needed to educate myself a lot more. So I went away and did a bit of research. I remember watching some TV documentaries, reading up, trying to understand the processes and how people referred and what the support organisations specifically for trans people were, because if I'm getting those questions, I need to be able to answer that. And that's kind of informed an interest and a passion for trans equality, in my personal life and, with trans friends and, through the professional work I do now as well. It's really sort of spurred me to take moves to be more trans inclusive in the work that I was doing.
Yeah. I've also taken those calls from people wanting to talk about dressing in certain clothing and how it makes them feel. And I've been reflecting on this more recently with the book and writing the book and thinking about how, people, we talk about sexuality, we talk about gender identity, but actually it's really hard to talk about one without also talking about the other because one informs the other and vice versa. And I was thinking about those kinds of calls happening a lot more at a time where we didn't have as much language and there hadn't been as much exploration for people. Not to say that some of those calls were people who identified as transvestites and still do cross-dress and things like that. So not to exclude that at all.
I think where people are talking about their sexual behavior or talking about, the ways in which they express themselves, I think there is a kind of a similarity or a continuum there. I think it's interesting. Thinking of the language as well. I mean, I remember, when I started in the 90s, we were still using the language that was of the 70s, which was, the trans issues would be covered by the acronym TVTS.
TVTS, yeah, totally.
And that was the name of some of the publications, the newsletters, that would be delivered to us for information. And when we've been researching our history at London Friend for our 50th birthday, it turned out we were supporting with meeting space for the TVTS group, which was independent of London Friend, but was meeting at our premises at the time. And we had a very long relationship of kind of supporting that. But using the same term, that was being used by members of the community themselves.
Yeah.
For well over 20 years. It was wasn't really until probably into the 2000s, I think, that we started to change that language.
100%. And even in the time that I've been at Switchboard, the language has evolved so much quicker to include non-binary, gender non-conforming, gender fluid.
Yeah.
Not that those expressions weren't there before, but finally there's this language starting to open.
Exactly.
It's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why there's the internet we could look at as being one, but yeah, I don't know. Why do you think that is?
I think the internet does play a part. I think it's a platform by which people who are geographically disparate, but who have a common experience can come together. And if the mechanism for that is there, that in itself, by the coming together, spurs more conversation, and maybe that also spurs, getting those kind of definitions and that vocabulary back out to a wider audience. Because I absolutely agree with you. I think, whilst the term non-binary and gender non-conforming, whilst those terms are much newer, everybody I know who now identifies in some kind of non-binary way consistently says, this isn't a new feeling for me. This is how I've always felt. Now I've got the language for it. It just makes sense. I can describe myself now, where I felt difficult, it was difficult to put myself into a category before. So you're absolutely right. The concepts aren't new. But I think, suddenly people have a wider platform for which to discuss and exchange their own experiences. And, that helps other people find their place, find their community, find their kinship. Yeah,
definitely. The language in Switchboard is so great, and I'm sure that you will have witnessed that changing and evolving. One of the things I'm looking at the moment is like sex and bodies, basically, which is kind of what we're just talking about now. How many of the calls that you took at Switchboard were about those two things, do you think?
A lot about sex. We shoehorn sex into the calls because, we had an HIV prevention function. And so we were told to try and raise safer sex and safer sex information in every call. So, you'd suddenly, you get somebody calling about I need to find a gay plumber. And, you'd be bringing up the topic of sex in the call. So, by nature, a lot of the calls do that. But I guess because, the primary the bulk of the callers were lesbian, gay or bisexual. So the discussions that you were having with them were around their sexual identity and their sexual behavior and their sexual feelings. Even though we know that, being lesbian, gay or bisexual is about so much more. There's the far more cultural aspects as well. But, the core of it is about, who we fancy and the sexual attraction that we have. So I think it was inevitable that a lot of calls would do that. But I think it was really good because I think the ability to talk very frankly about sex whilst not steering into kind of sexual fantasy was really important, because you were then able to give kind of, good sexual health information at a time when it was a little bit more difficult to come by. I mean, now, there is slightly better sex education in schools. There's not the shadow of Section 28 that is confusing teachers about whether they can, give sexual health information about same-sex behaviour. So it has got better. I still don't think it's great for LGBT people. But you can go online and it's really, it's very, very easy to access that kind of sexual health information. At the time, it wasn't. You had to get it from leaflets. We couldn't go on, the internet wasn't there. And really, you'd only get those leaflets if you went to LGBT venues or if you went to sexual health clinics. And, if you didn't know anything about those, like a clinic, I mean, why would you go? How would you go? How would you get that information? And you weren't taught about it in school. So I think the fact that we were talking very frankly and openly was a really good intervention. And we were shoving it into everything. You pardon the expression. Because we were taking the initiative to bring it up with people.
As it's kind of like Switchboard was sex education.
Yeah, absolutely.
You do it all. So why not get all the electrolytes? Hydrate better than water with new Gatorade Lower Sugar. Now with no artificial flavors, sweeteners, or colors. And 75% less sugar than regular Gatorade. New to the fridge, all the Gatorade electrolytes you love. Gatorade Lower Sugar. Is it in you? Now available nationwide.
Over 90 of the top 100 U.S. accounting firms trust Bill to handle bill pay processes. Why? Because our tools are built on over $1 trillion of secure payments. We're not just moving money. We're powering financial workflows for 500,000 customers. That's a level of expertise you just can't fake. Ready to talk with an expert? Visit Bill.com/proven to get started and grab a $250 gift card as a thank you. Terms and conditions apply. See offer page for details.
Okay, I have to tell you, I was just looking on eBay where I go for all kinds of things I love, and there it was.
That hologram trading card. One of the rarest, the last one I needed for my set. Shiny like the
designer handbag of my dreams. One of a kind. eBay had it, and now everyone's asking, ooh, where'd you get your
windshield wipers? eBay has all the parts that fit my car. No more annoying, just beautiful.
Millions of finds, each with a story. eBay. Things people love.
Hello. Our company is called Aunt Nell.
Cute name. Needs a Patreon.
Whether we're making podcasts like this one, or organising events, or facilitating queer community workshops, or training the next generation of storytellers,
Aunt Nell invites people to listen differently.
For tons of bonus content, including exclusive episodes of the logbooks, and to support all our work,
you can join our Patreon now. Go to patreon.com/AuntNell.
Membership tiers start from just a few quid a month.
was that? Did you learn a lot at Switchboard about?
Oh, I learned a hell of a lot. I mean, I had to, because if I can't go on the phones and be in a position where somebody's going to ask me a question without learning that myself. So absolutely. I mean, I constantly tried to keep up with information, to make sure you were giving the right kind of information about condom use, about lube, but also about sexual health for women, which there was very little information around. I mean, in sexual health information for lesbian and bi women is so much more than, use a dental dam. Whoever bloody used a dental dam? I mean, there was just, we really needed to kind of understand that. So it really, opened my eyes. But I think even from the interview, I don't know what the interview process is now, but at the time, as interviewees, we were asked questions, which the questions were there to test our ability to talk openly about sex. And as men, we were asked the question, what do lesbians do in bed? And then asked, what do gay men do in bed? And it was reversed for women. And I thought it was such a good question, because what it allowed you to demonstrate is whether you knew anything about sex between people of the opposite sex to you, and what was the balance between it. Because I remember interviewing people where, some men who would really struggle to say anything about lesbian sex, but then it came to gay sex and they just rail off a whole load of things. And I'd be like, well, that's brilliant on one side, but you really need to know a little bit more about lesbians for the calls that you're going to take with them.
Yeah, I had that question. They asked me both, and I actually was so nervous. I completely smashed men having sex with men. But when it came to women having sex with women, all I could say was holding a hand. And I just completely blanked, and I was like, I am gay. I just can't think of anything. But prior to that, I just listed loads of gay male safe sex. So I guess I got through on that. That I was like, I promise I know, and my mind's just gone blank.
I think my response to the first question was that, well, have fun.
Yeah,
that probably got me through as well.
Yeah.
So.
Going back to the podcast, how did it feel? Did you listen to some of it?
Yeah, I listened to all of it.
How did it feel to listen back to you, but also to sort of your peers at that time and hear about the wider history?
Yeah, it was lovely. I mean, you got different perspectives on it. I mean, obviously my memories are my memories and my version of events. So it was really lovely to hear from other people who I knew, but also that I didn't. I think it was so interesting to reflect, because you're obviously reflecting with the passage of time. So you're hopefully in a wiser point in your life and a more experienced point in your life. So, and you're reflecting back with the I guess the sort of the context of when things happened, and with a more of an overview. So I just thought it was such a valuable process. Not my interest was not just the fact that I'm in this podcast and this is something I was involved in. Because the first two series were about time at Switchboard way before I joined.
Yeah.
And I think, just what you get from that, talking about hearing people who were there at the time and that first-hand experience, and first-hand experience of real emotional intimacy with callers, because I always thought that one of the strengths of Switchboard, to a volunteer, is that you get to hear really personal details told very openly and honestly from people about their lives. Sometimes you're the only person that they've ever told, but you get to really connect with what are the issues that people are experiencing here and now in relation to being LGBT. And generally you get to hear that at a point in your life where you are perhaps more robust and more confident in your own identity, because you've gone through a process of coming out, and you're talking to people who haven't yet. And I think it was a real reminder for me of what was going on in people's lives, genuinely going on in people's lives, rather than sort of thinking about the kind of the concept of LGBT issues. It was the reality of that. And I always found that such a privilege. And I also found it, as I moved into other kinds of work, client-facing work with LGBT people, it really helped inform that. And I've been a trainer on LGBT issues as well. And, I still use kind of, examples or things that I learned as a process of that to talk about on that training. It's just so important. And I think, if you, obviously, most of the audience for the logbooks wouldn't have been volunteers. So to hear people's accounts of that and to hear the reality of what was going on and the anxieties and the fears and the topics that were, causing concern for people. I mean, that's why I think the whole project's been such a valuable and such a rich source of queer history, because it's coming from a different perspective. It's not sort of an account written of the time. It's first-hand accounts and people, recalling their time and recalling exactly what they were talking about to people.
Yeah, you touched on some really important things there, and I suppose it's like zooming out and then zooming in. We talk about LGBT issues and that X percentage of people are experiencing this, but, nothing beats hearing a person saying, I feel like this. And you've got this logbook, which is like, it's a primary resource. It's written at the time. It's not someone remembering the last time they remembered it, that they remembered it. It is like in that moment. And, that's surrounded by memories from other people, but it does give this sort of lively feel to the history. And of course, if you really strip it back, we're talking about a human who feels lonely and isolated. And that is so relatable. So I think we've definitely had people come and talk to us who aren't part of our communities and who say like, this has allowed me to understand it on like a whole nother level, because pretty much every single person in the world knows what it feels like to be left out, to feel alone, to feel shame even. And if you can relate to that and connect to that, then hopefully it allows you to understand those people and, sort of fight for a more inclusive, better world.
I think as well that, the purpose of the logbooks was to help to provide some practical support for us as volunteers taking calls. So, to be able to follow up difficult calls where, somebody had a call and the person said, I'll ring back, to inform us of those calls, but also to help people who were multiple callers to try and progress them and move them forward. But I think it also had the purpose, or not the purpose, had the effect of being able to chronicle and see what kind of themes were coming through. Because, we all took our individual calls and, nobody else but us and the caller were privy to them. So having something which, obviously didn't record the detail of everything, but, allowed things to be noted, and then for us to notice trends that were coming through, or, because that helped, if you had like particular calls that were, looking for a particular kind of information, it meant we could go and try, it sort of accrue that information for people. But if there were themes that were coming up, before my time, but I think, there must have been, a lot more calls about kind of like, police brutality, around, harassment at work, things like that. And, you get to understand what the impact of those things are and what kind of things are coming up. And therefore, as a service, you can be better equipped to deal with them. But then, with the added bonus of now looking back at them as a historical document, exactly as you say, it's that kind of like immediate account. People would write down, exactly the memories are there because you've just spoken to the person, and it's something important enough to need to note for your fellow volunteers.
Monty there just summarizes really what our entire project is about, like using the logbooks from Switchboard as a kind of document for the future, even though it's about the past, and how it's important to share these stories for the new generation and then to keep growing as a queer community into the future, basically. So I really appreciate Monty for describing it in that way.
Yeah, totally. And of course, no one ever got convicted under Section 28, but that logbook entry was from 2002, the one that we heard at the top. So just before it was repealed. And so it's really important to recognise that a law can create a really deadly environment, even though no one was actually convicted underneath it. And all I am left thinking is, thank God Monty was there.
Yeah, thank God. Well, that's the end of this episode, but what you can get is more exclusive episodes from the Logbooks podcast on our Patreon, Tash, if you wanted to sign up there for a couple of quid a month.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'll actually give you a free account if you want, but the listeners can sign up. It is patreon.com/AuntNell. The Logbooks is an Aunt Nell production.
It is hosted and produced by Tash Walker and Adam Zmith.
The voice of the Logbooks is Serena James.
The assistant producer is Marnie Woodmeade.
Engineered by David Pye.
Music by Tom Foskett-Barnes.
Original artwork by Natalie Doto.
Thanks to Steph Dickers and team at the Bishopsgate Institute.
Our publisher, Faber Books.
The dreamboats at Acast.
The staff and volunteers at Switchboard, and all the contributors who shared their stories.
Switchboard continues to take phone calls from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day. If you're affected by any of the issues in this podcast, or need to discuss anything to do with your gender identity or sexuality, you can call Switchboard on 0800 0119 100. Email hello@switchboard.lgbt or instant message via switchboard.lgbt, where you can also donate money or time to help.
Over 90 of the top 100 U.S. accounting firms trust Bill to handle bill pay processes. Why? Because our tools are built on over $1 trillion of secure payments. We're not just moving money. We're powering financial workflows for 500,000 customers. That's a level of expertise you just can't fake. Ready to talk with an expert? Visit Bill.com/proven to get started and grab a $250 gift card as a thank you. Terms and conditions apply. See offer page for details.
You do it all. So why not get all the electrolytes? Hydrate better than water with new Gatorade Lower Sugar. Now with no artificial flavors, sweeteners, or colors. And 75% less sugar than regular Gatorade. New to the fridge. All the Gatorade electrolytes you love. Gatorade Lower Sugar. Is it in you? Now available nationwide.
Explore a new spring collection of pieces that take you to the places you dream about. A suitcase filled with heritage-inspired suede jackets, relaxed linen, and dresses for every adventure. Discover more at bananarepublic.com.